Have you ever wondered if true love can truly be resurrected after betrayal? I loved her, proposed, and was rejected with a flimsy excuse. Years later, she returned, broken, seeking solace in a life she discarded. But I found a web of deceit threatening to ensnare me. This isn't just a story about a second chance. It's about the dangerous price of confusing pity with true healing and the realization some people risk your freedom for their convenience. By the end, you'll understand why walking away, even from your first love, can be the most powerful act of self-preservation and the true path to peace. 8 years ago, my life split in two. She was my high school sweetheart. The future I envisioned, a home, a family. We were young in our first year of college, just 2 hours apart, but the distance felt like an ocean. The thought of marriage burned in my heart for months, a steady flame against sparse calls and hurried visits. One crisp autumn evening, under a street lamp, ring box in hand, I asked her to marry me. Her response was a soft, hesitant refusal, cushioned by a promise to her mother, not to marry until after graduation. A promise to her mother, I remember thinking, not to me, my heart, swelled with hope moments before deflated, leaving a cold, hollow ache. I looked at her, at the beautiful face that filled my dreams, and I knew some promises were stronger than others. I wasn't hers. My voice, tight with a pain I hadn't known, asked, I'm asking you, not your mother. If the answer is no, I hope you have a good life. The words hung, a silent farewell to a future that would never be. The silence was deafening, a stark echo of unspoken truth. That night, the next chapter of my life began, not with a yes, but with the quiet, devastating sound of a door closing. This profound moment, under the indifferent gaze of the street lamp, became the unexpected catalyst for a complete reimagining of my path forward. The disappointment was immense, a heavy cloak, but beneath it, a seed of new resolve began to take root, prompting a radical shift in my life's direction, a forced opening to a world I hadn't yet considered. The good life I wished for felt like cruel irony as I walked away, leaving behind the shattered fragments of my own dreams. My life, as I knew it, broke into countless pieces. College, once a clear path towards our shared future, now felt utterly meaningless, an empty vessel without her intended presence. Textbooks became impossibly heavy, lectures dull, and a vibrant campus a hollow echo of dreams that would never materialize. I dropped out, the decision swift and resolute, born from raw heartbreak and a desperate need for a new direction, a purpose not tied to a we that no longer existed. The world felt like it was closing in, suffocating me, and I needed an escape, a radical change to redefine myself beyond that specific pain. The military, with its stringent discipline and clear objectives, offered that stark contrast, a structure designed to rebuild a life that had suddenly lost its foundation. It was a choice that surprised many. I wasn't the typical soldier boy, but the uniform represented new skin, a chance to shed the old, heartbroken self. As I signed the papers, there was no fanfare, no emotional outburst, just a cold, quiet, unyielding determination. It wasn't about revenge or proving anything to her. It was fundamentally about survival, about finding a new blueprint for a life that had been so brutally ripped apart. The persistent weight of her refusal still lingered, a phantom limb ache. But with each firm step towards this unfamiliar new path, I felt a fraction of my strength returning, a flicker of hard-won agency in a world that had felt entirely out of my control. This decisive move marked the beginning of my true independence, forging a destiny purely for myself. Germany became my unlikely sanctuary, a 2-year immersion into a world vastly different from the small-town heartbreak I'd left behind, a crucible where a new self was forged. The military offered more than rigid discipline. It offered expansive perspective, a crucial chance to see beyond the narrow confines of my personal sorrow. I learned to navigate new cities with cautious confidence, to decipher new languages, and to embrace a new, tangible sense of purpose that transcended any fleeting romantic entanglement. The rigid structure, the unwavering camaraderie of my fellow soldiers, the stark and often breathtaking beauty of the European landscape, it all collectively forged a different, stronger version of me. I wasn't the typical soldier boy, but within this demanding environment, I discovered a quiet strength, a deep-seated resilience I never knew I possessed. There were moments, of course, when her ghost would whisper from the distant past, when the memories, though faded, would surface unbidden. Yet, with each passing month, they grew less frequent, less potent, losing their power to destabilize me. I meticulously built a new routine, cultivated new, genuine friendships, nurtured new aspirations, each brick carefully laid. My burgeoning love for travel blossomed under the European sun, my appreciation for history deepened, and my sense of self-worth solidified, becoming an unshakable inner core. This wasn't merely a physical journey across a vast ocean. It was a profound internal odyssey, a deliberate shedding of old skin and a gradual, almost sacred embrace of a man capable of standing on his own, entirely unburdened by past promises or the specter of broken futures. The experience was invaluable. Its impact on my character was profound and irreversible, shaping me into a man who understood his own fortitude. Years folded into themselves, each day a quiet testament to a life rebuilt on solid ground, far removed from the emotional turbulence of my past. Then, during a much-anticipated leave back in North Carolina, the past, with its twisted sense of timing, decided to make a phone call. My phone buzzed, displaying an unfamiliar number, yet an inexplicable sense of familiarity washed over me, a faint echo from a distant time. It was her. The sound of her voice, after so many silent years, was a profound jolt, a current of dormant emotion I hadn't realized I still carried, resurfacing with surprising force. She spoke in hushed, vulnerable tones of hardships endured, of a marriage that had not only failed but had brought her immense pain, and of a child, an unexpected blessing that had anchored her through turbulent times. She hinted at unspoken regrets, her voice laced with a subtle plea for understanding. Stories of her marriage had reached me indirectly over the years, fragments of a life she'd chosen instead of mine, and they painted a stark picture of pain and regret, far removed from the good life I had once wished her. Despite the deep history, despite the raw wound she'd inflicted so long ago, a part of me, the part that stubbornly remembered the intensity of first love, felt a flicker of hope. She was my first love, after all, an intoxicating idea of rekindling that connection, of offering solace, perhaps even building something new and stronger from the ashes, was surprisingly potent. We made plans to meet the following day at her home. I remember feeling a lightness I hadn't experienced in years. The long drive ahead seemed short, fueled by a mixture of anticipation, apprehension, and a potent desire to see if the old magic could, against all odds, be resurrected. It was a potent cocktail of hope and naivety, a dangerous brew I was all too willing to drink, blurring the lines of past hurt with potential future happiness. The next day, the drive toward her home was less a journey and more a pilgrimage, fueled by a potent blend of nostalgia and fresh hope. I navigated the familiar streets near Fort Bragg, a neighborhood of well-kept lawns and respectable, if somewhat uniform, ranch-style houses that hinted at quiet lives. Each turn of the wheel felt like a step back in time, yet also a cautious leap into an uncertain, tantalizing future. My heart pounded a restless rhythm against my ribs, a tumultuous mixture of eager anticipation for what might be and a quiet apprehension born from past pain. I kept replaying our phone conversation, dissecting every word, every subtle nuance, searching for elusive reassurance. She had sounded genuinely sorry, genuinely vulnerable, her voice hinting at a deep and abiding weariness. Had time truly changed her? Had life, in its harsh lessons, finally taught her what she needed to learn? I desperately wanted to believe it. I wanted to believe that the woman I once loved, the one who had chosen a dramatically different path all those years ago, was now finally ready for a path with me. As I turned onto her street, the late afternoon sun dappled generously through mature trees, casting shifting, playful patterns on the warm asphalt, a deceptive calm. Her house, a modest but charming ranch-style home, came into view precisely as she had described. I pulled into the driveway, killed the engine, and sat for a moment, letting the pervasive silence of suburban afternoons settle around me, an almost spiritual quietude. This was it, the moment I had dreamed of, perhaps unconsciously, for years. A second chance, a fresh start. I took a deep breath, the comforting scent of pine and freshly cut grass filling my lungs, steeling myself, and then stepped out of the car, walking toward the door that held a profound yet fragile promise of rekindled love. My vision was fixed on that door, a gateway to a potentially transformed destiny, ignoring the subtle unease stirring within. I walked up to the door, my heart thrumming with a nervous excitement, a rhythm of hope and trepidation. When she opened it, I felt a familiar jolt, a silent wow that caught in my throat and momentarily stole my breath. She stood approximately 5 feet 9 inches tall, her presence commanding, yet softened by a gorgeous, almost ethereal smile that still held an undeniable allure. Her dark dreadlocks were gathered in a neat bun, with a few elegant strands framing her face, highlighting her beautiful, smooth brown skin and eyes that had once held my entire world. Her smile, even after all these years, retained the uncanny power to melt my heart, overriding years of guarded emotion. She led me inside, and we settled into the living room, the air thick with the unspoken history that hung between us. She began to tell her story, a raw narrative of pain, disillusionment, and harrowing survival. She spoke of her child, the unexpected blessing that had anchored her through turbulent times, and of a marriage that had not only failed but had been brutally marred by cruelty. She recounted the devastating incident on her wedding night, when her husband had deliberately wiped himself with her pristine nightgown, throwing it in her face, uttering the chilling, dehumanizing words, "That's all I wanted in the first place." It was a raw, vulnerable confession, revealing layers of suffering I could only imagine, stirring forgotten protectiveness within me. She explained how she got pregnant early in the marriage, a significant factor in why she felt trapped and stayed for so long, enduring years of abuse, unable to escape. She confirmed their separation, painting a vivid picture of a woman escaping a nightmarish existence. I listened, my heart aching for the young woman who had endured such an ordeal, and a renewed sense of protective purpose began to stir within me, a fervent desire to offer the stability and respect she so clearly lacked. The narrative was compelling, almost overwhelming, drawing me deeper into her world. As she spoke, narrating her painful past with a voice laced with newfound vulnerability, my gaze subtly, almost instinctively, swept across the living room. My military years had rigorously sharpened my observations, teaching me to meticulously read environments, to sense the unspoken truths lurking beneath the surface. And what I saw, what I instinctively felt, was a growing, unsettling dissonance between her compelling story of recent separation and the tangible reality of the space around me. Most homes, when a woman truly lives alone, gradually and unmistakably take on her unique persona. The specific decor, the intimate arrangement of objects, even the subtle, lingering scents. But this home, unequivocally, still smelled of a man. The overall color palette leaned distinctly masculine. The furniture arrangements felt heavy and intentionally placed, and there were small, active signs of a very current male presence that transcended mere storage or lingering, faded memories. A well-read sports magazine casually discarded on the coffee table, its pages slightly dog-eared, a pair of worn work boots neatly aligned by the back door, suggesting recent use, a particular scent of aftershave or specific laundry detergent that was decidedly male and, critically, very current. My smile, which had initially been one of sympathetic understanding and rekindled affection, slowly and imperceptibly faded. The warmth I had felt a moment ago began to chill, replaced by a cold, dawning suspicion that pricked at my newfound hope. I stopped making direct eye contact, my focus now entirely consumed by piecing together these silent, damning clues. The fragmented pieces clicked into place with an uncomfortable, sickening precision, forming an undeniable picture. I turned back to her, my voice low and even, devoid of the earlier warmth, stripped of any lingering tenderness. "Where does your husband currently reside?" I asked, the question hanging heavy in the suffocating air. She hesitated, her eyes flickering nervously, a telltale sign of profound discomfort and deceit, before she quietly, almost inaudibly stated, "In the guest bedroom." The words hit me like a sudden, brutal physical blow, confirming every unsettling observation. I said, "I know you don't have me in another man's house." I stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor, shattering the fragile, deceptive piece of the room with a violent finality. My composure, meticulously cultivated over years of military discipline and numerous personal trials, wavered for only a split second before a cold, hard resolve crystallized within me. I stood, pushing my chair back with a deliberate, echoing scrape that mirrored the shattering of my renewed hopes. "You have me in another man's house," I stated, my voice flat, devoid of emotion, yet carrying the crushing weight of profound, calculating betrayal. The unwritten law in North Carolina, a code of honor and potential danger I deeply understood, flashed through my mind. A man found with another man's wife at his home could face severe, life-altering consequences, legal and otherwise. She had willingly, brazenly, put me in a precarious and potentially dangerous situation, jeopardizing my freedom and safety. The thought was not merely infuriating. It was a deep, personal insult. Without another word, I began walking toward the door, each step firm, resolute, a definitive punctuation mark. She, startled by my sudden, unequivocal shift, jumped to her feet, her initial composure replaced by a desperate, palpable panic. "No, wait! Please don't go!" she cried, her voice cracking with raw, desperate fear. She reached out, grabbing at my clothes, tugging frantically at my arm, her desperation evident in every twitch and plea. "Stay, please. I'll do anything. I'll give you whatever you want." Her words, a crude, manipulative offer of seduction, were a final, sickening blow, an ultimate desecration of what we once were. The woman I had once loved, the one I had just felt a protective impulse towards, was now shamelessly attempting to use my lingering affection in her own body as a manipulative tool to keep me from exposing her lie, and perhaps to secure some form of shelter or stability for herself. The illusion shattered completely, leaving only bitter truth. There was no rekindling, just a desperate woman trying to leverage my presence. The insult was profound, irreversible. I pushed her hand away, gently but firmly, the touch of final, absolute dismissal of any lingering tenderness. Her face crumpled, but I didn't look back. The door was my only focus, my only escape from a house built on deceit and dangerous manipulation. His repeated, challenging question, "Can I help you?" ignited a cold, controlled fire within me, burning away any last vestige of hesitation. It wasn't an offer of assistance. It was a thinly veiled threat, a territorial display designed solely to intimidate and assert his perceived authority. I looked him directly in the eye, my gaze unwavering, letting him see the unyielding resolve that had been forged in a different kind of fire, a different kind of battle, one he couldn't possibly comprehend. "If you can't move your car," I stated, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl that carried the weight of an unshakable promise, "then I will have to drive across your lawn." The words hung heavy, not as an idle threat, but as a definitive statement of impending action. For a brief, charged moment, he seemed to falter, a flicker of genuine surprise crossing his face, momentarily shattering his arrogant facade. But then the obnoxious smirk returned, accompanied by an underestimation of the man before him. "Yes, but can I help you?" he reiterated, pushing my patience to its absolute limit. That was it, the final straw. His obstinance, his casual, insulting disregard for my explicit request, sealed his fate and unequivocally defined my next move. I shifted my gaze from his eyes to the pristine front lawn, a canvas of vibrant green that was about to be indelibly marked, a symbol of my unwavering defiance. With a deliberate, unhurried motion, I put the car in reverse, then swung the steering wheel sharply. The engine roared, a deep, guttural sound of raw defiance and unleashed power. My tires bit fiercely into meticulously manicured grass, sending clumps of rich earth and turf flying dramatically into the air behind me. I looked him in the face one last time, a silent, powerful statement of my unshakable resolve, as I drove across his front lawn, leaving two distinct, defiant trails of tire impressions carving deeply through the perfectly kept grass. The act was more than just an escape. It was a symbolic rejection of his authority, of her deceit, and of any future where I would allow myself to be trapped by another's manipulations. The crunch of gravel beneath my tires as I reached the street was a sound of freedom, a definitive, visceral break from a situation I utterly refused to be a part of, gradually faded into a bitter memory, a cautionary tale I carried, a permanent, albeit receding, mark on the landscape of my personal history. I meticulously built my life, focusing with unwavering dedication on my career, nurturing meaningful, honest friendships, and finding a quiet contentment that wasn't reliant on fleeting romantic promises or the whims of another. Then, one ordinary afternoon, fate, with its twisted, ironic sense of humor, intervened once more. I saw her again. She was older now, her striking beauty still present, but undeniably tinged with profound weariness, a deep-seated fatigue that hadn't been there before, replacing her youthful confidence. The vibrant assurance she once exuded was now replaced by a visible fragility, a haunted, almost desperate look in her eyes that betrayed years of hardship. She approached me, tentative, her movements uncertain, her voice soft, laden with what sounded like a practiced apology. She spoke in hushed, remorseful tones of her husband's continued, relentless abuse, the brutal beatings whenever he felt like it, the nightmare she had been living, a cycle of suffering that had seemingly consumed her. She expressed profound regret for our meeting all those years ago, for putting me in such a dangerous, compromising situation, her words begging for absolution. Her narrative painted a vivid picture of a woman deeply trapped, deeply suffering, and a part of me, the part that still harbored a fragment of empathy for the past, felt a fleeting pang of pity for her plight. She was seeking absolution, perhaps, or even understanding, a desperate validation of her suffering. But the man who stood before her was not the naive young lover she had once so callously rejected, nor the hopeful individual she had nearly entangled in her web of lies. He was a man who had learned the hard, brutal lessons of self-preservation, the true, devastating cost of misplaced trust. I listened, my face calm, impassive, unreadable, allowing her words to wash over me, but refusing to let them penetrate the protective layers I had so painstakingly built around my heart. The narrative she wove was undeniably tragic, but the truth, the raw, unfiltered truth of her actions, overshadowed any sympathy I might have felt. I knew what I had to say, and it would not be easy, but it was essential for my peace. I let her finish, her narrative of abuse and regret hanging heavy in the air like a suffocating shroud, a testament to her prolonged suffering. Then, into that profound, burdened silence, I spoke. My voice was calm, steady, each word measured and deliberate, carrying the accumulated weight of years of silent reflection and hard-won clarity. Darcy, I began, my tone even. You were willing to risk my life and my freedom, to place me in immediate danger against the very man you chose as a husband, yet you fundamentally didn't want to be my wife. The truth, unvarnished and stark in its simplicity, hit her like a sudden, physical blow. Her mouth fell open, a silent gasp escaping, her eyes widening in a mixture of profound shock and a dawning, painful comprehension. The full realization of the brutal irony of her choices, of the profound, almost criminal disrespect she had shown me, registered clearly and visibly on her face. There was no more pretense, no more manipulation, just the raw, undeniable understanding of her own actions laid bare before her. The words were not meant to be cruel, but to be true, a final, definitive statement of where I stood, unmoving and resolute. I continued, my voice firm, allowing no room for argument, no possibility for further deceit or negotiation. Darcy, you are a piece of poop, and I never want you to contact me again. The words were blunt, unflinching, a deliberate choice to use language that left no ambiguity, no possibility for misinterpretation, no space for lingering hope. It was a complete and utter severing, a declaration that she had crossed an unforgivable line, not once, but repeatedly, and there was no going back, no room for reconciliation, no space for her in my carefully constructed life. The devastating impact of my words was undeniable, a crushing weight. Her face, which moments ago had been filled with desperate, pleading hope for understanding, now dissolved into a mix of shock, profound hurt, and perhaps a sliver of genuine, belated shame. But my resolve remained unbroken, my stance unyielding. This was not about revenge. It was about protecting my peace, reclaiming my self-respect, and safeguarding the integrity of the life I had so painstakingly built without her destructive influence. The words hung in the air, a final, decisive hammer blow that shattered any lingering threads connecting our fractured past. I had said what needed to be said, not with anger, but with a quiet, unshakable certainty that settled deep within my bones. There was no argument, no desperate begging from her, just a profound, echoing silence that absorbed the finality of my statement. I turned and walked away, not in haste or fury, but with a steady, measured pace of a man who had finally, irrevocably closed a deeply painful chapter of his life. I didn't look back. There was nothing left to see, nothing left to salvage. The command was crystal clear, never to contact me again. And I knew, with every fiber of my being, that this time it was truly, undeniably the end. The door, which had swung open years ago with the false promise of rekindled love, was now firmly, irrevocably shut, bolted against any future intrusion. This was an act of cruelty. It was an act of profound self-respect, a declaration of boundaries that had been hard-won through years of pain, resilience, and growth. I had learned through bitter experience that some doors are not meant to be reopened, not out of lingering bitterness, but because a better, stronger foundation has already been meticulously built on the other side. My life, once dictated by her choices and my reactive responses, was now truly, wholly my own. The peace that settled over me was not the quiet of loneliness, but a profound, resonant calm of absolute clarity. It was a peace of knowing my inherent worth, of understanding that true love doesn't demand risks to your life or freedom, and that some relationships are meant only to teach you what you truly deserve, and then stay firmly, definitively in the past. The lingering ache was gone, replaced by a quiet, unwavering strength. The journey had been long, marked by heartbreak and hard lessons, but ultimately it had led me home to myself secure and free.